Okay, I think we are live. I'll let people kind of hop on our live stream before we kind of get it going. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Tonight, I am here with Thomas Smith. There he is.
Hello.
To look at his work, SUBARIUM II, reprise. Thomas is one of Akron Soul Train's emerging artists, showing in the CapSOUL gallery, and his work will be on view until March 23rd. The gallery is open Wednesday through Saturday from 11 to 4, and we are open late until 9 o'clock tomorrow for the Akron Art Walk. So when you're going around seeing all the cool art in Akron, make sure to stop by Akron Soul Train. As usual, thank you so much to our sponsors for helping us support emerging artists. Okay, I'm going to flip my camera around, and Thomas can start with a little introduction about the title and some of the ideas behind your work.
Hi.
Yeah.
So just go?
Yeah.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Thomas Smith. I am a Cleveland-based artist currently stationed out of Cleveland Heights. Love Cleveland. And I'm going to do a little walkthrough of some of my artworks and maybe talk about the naming conventions and why they have some weird names, and then maybe about the artwork themselves.
Yeah.
So over here we have Eco 6 SP1. This is one of the pieces, I would consider it to be my capstone piece of my BFA. And so when thinking about my BFA, I was thinking a lot about materials of suburbs, thinking about the faux-ness of the suburbs, and thinking about our obsession with aesthetics and how that might not be conducive to actually a sustainable environment, or an environment that it fosters community. If anything, it kind of shelters us out from community. It separates us. This piece over here is Pillar. This was actually one of the first artworks. It's not the first, but the second. It was just sort of an exploration of, again, those materials. So cedar wood, all of my cedar wood pieces is actually from fence posts. You get them from Home Depot, and they have such a beautiful grain, and we paint them white. And you know, it's like thinking of that white picket fence suburban kind of aesthetic, but like kind of flipping it a little bit. So it's actually a very hollow box with a really complex internal structure that kind of holds the whole thing together. And who is this one? That's right. My naming conventions are a little crazy. I'll go into that. But Eco 7 SP2 was kind of a departure from my Pillar aesthetic, kind of making something that looks a little bit more sci-fi, maybe a little mid-century modern, because that's all the rage nowadays. You know, everybody's obsessed with their tilted legs, and yet it's still made out of these really not so friendly materials, a lot of particle board and stuff like that, where, you know, I have these like store-bought legs onto the nice built frames. When you think of mid-century modern, you think of like high quality. So I think it's kind of funny mixing that, and then like all of the silver tubing kind of gives it that space age kind of aesthetic. But that's a little walkthrough.
Yeah, so how'd you come up with the name SUBARIUM? Does that have to do with like the suburban landscape a little bit? Yeah.
So I don't know if you're familiar, but there is, so we think of aquariums, vivariums, paludariums. Those are ecosystems that are designed for a very specific form of life. You have orchidariums, you have like all of these different like hyper-specific ecosystems. And so when I was trying to come up with a name for my BFA, or for my work in general, I was coming up with this, I wanted to make up my own term. So these are my SUBARIUM. They are my middle-class suburban aesthetic ecosystem. And it's kind of the whole commentary of that system is capsulated within the pieces. I think of them as individual ecosystems in that sense, designed specifically for that.
Okay, that makes sense. And then your names for each piece.
Yeah.
That.
So my naming conventions are, I kind of, when I started off, I didn't have a naming convention, so I just named them like whatever came to mind. But I retroactively, recently, actually within the last day, decided sort of this whole idea that each one has this naming convention of eco, which implies that it has plants now or had plants at some point. So that applies for both if they're alive or dead. And then SP stands for support pillar, and that's where all of the fun electronics and all the fun stuff that keeps these things running, kind of as like a ventilator almost on the side. And so I kind of like, when naming artwork, I kind of like having a little bit of sterility because it kind of reminds me of that environment, kind of like this, a landscape full of brands and a landscape full of like cold identities. And I think just by giving them numbers and designations, it's kind of like how you feel about, like, I don't know, a ship. A ship has just like a tag, and then you hit a human name with it or something like that to give it like personality. But at the end of the day, it's still this like cold, unfeeling, just structure. And it's, and I don't know. I think that there's something really weird about that.
I love how they, I don't know, they remind me of these weird, I guess, like sci-fi type robot names. In a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, and then, so talking a little bit about the support kind of things, these marble looking structures, can you talk a little bit about these guys?
So they came along, as I was designing my work, I wanted to make work that became more functional, and I don't need to take care of it. I want it to be able to take care of itself to an extent, to become more of a form of an ecosystem. And so there's a lot of material that has to go into that, and I still wanted to keep these really like sleek, clean, small structures almost, like they're human-like, they're almost like portraits in some ways.
Yeah.
And so my creative outlet to that was creating this support structure. And the support structure on the inside has all sorts of electronics and water pumps and timers and all the things that keep this alive. Because it's a very strenuous condition to have plants inside of a box. They need a lot of work. So it was kind of my creative way of doing that. And so these marble pillars, which almost kind of look like podiums, are made out of pink foam. They're not marble because I don't have money. I pretend. Again, playing into that aesthetic. So they're marble painted on pink foam. And so it's basically continuing that whole idea of a facade, something that is totally not real. You know, they're really light, they're really flimsy, and they even get like damage and wear and tear, and I don't want to fix that. That's not important to me to fix because it just shows you the materiality underneath. Because I think the materials that I build these out of, personally for myself, and maybe not necessarily for my artist statement, I find these materials beautiful. I've been surrounded by them my entire life, and I both want to mask them and elevate them. Like, you wouldn't think of fence post. You would think like maybe a solid wood box or something like that. Like maybe not even a box. Maybe it is just a solid piece of cedar. But I think that there's something beautiful about it. I think there's something really beautiful about pink foam in that same way. Even though I'm covering it over, it's such a, like, artists use it all the time.
No, I like what you said about like both masking and elevating, because like in a way you are masking the foam in the same way that, you know, these are these beautiful kind of like worlds that these plants can flourish in for a certain amount of time before, you know, they might not be able to flourish in them anymore. But at the same time, like, you're not really hiding the fact that it is pink foam or a fence post. You're just like presenting it in a different way. It's kind of cheeky.
I like to think, okay, I'm glad you say cheeky, because my artwork on the surface is very serious. And it's because I am a very, like, I mean, like, I have a statement. I have a very, like, I want to talk about this very specific thing and speak about it in a semi-serious manner, but I don't like to take myself personally too seriously. So I like having moments of cheekiness. Like it's quite obvious that the Pink Panther is sort of a thing that shows up in all of my work.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit about the Pink Panther? That's where I was gonna go next.
Yeah, he is. I love him. Not only because Pink Panther 1950s, thinking of this cheeky character that's kind of like taunting you, but also he is this. He is kind of the logo or mascot for a very specific pink styrofoam, not styrofoam, but insulating like foam for the insides of your houses.
Oh yeah, like I know what you're talking about. Those insulation foam
he's the
stuff.
actual label. So like he shows up directly on the surface of the pink foam itself, and I purposely keep that push and pull to break that like effect.
Yeah.
And so he came out of just like painting on top of the pink foam. He's like even like here, and he's sneaky. You know what I mean? He's hiding. You wouldn't even notice it right away. But I fell in love with it, and I was like, why would I mask over this when I can just elevate it more and make it more cheeky? So I always have him kind of like tauntingly sitting there being like, yeah, this is the environment we live in.
No, I love it because he's unexpected when people kind of think about this type of work.
Yeah.
It's just unexpected to all of a sudden have this like cartoon character show up.
I think that he's funny, and he's sort of like, he taunts, but he's also kind of like, he's just there. I think he's like, we're the plants and we're behind him, and he's this unfeeling brand that's just like, everything's fine. Everything's fine, everyone.
I mean, the kind of like with the whole like suburban landscape and chains and commercial products, and he's kind of like a partial symbol of that too.
Yeah, he literally, I think that there's something really interesting about how, like, in our form of capitalism, I don't mean to get onto capitalism conversation, but in our form of capitalism, we do have like these icons. And how a single icon like Ronald McDonald or like, I don't know, the Monopoly Man can hold so much significant meaning just by existing.
Yeah.
And so I kind of hijacked that icon. I now take him onto me, and I hope this brand, it's a Toledo-based brand. They're Ohio. They're if they find me, I'm gonna be in trouble, right? But I don't know. I think that hijacking that brand is something that I want to continue in my work.
Yeah, very cool. Can we talk maybe a little bit about the inside of these terrariums? How do you, I guess, maybe pick the plants? How do you get them growing? Yeah. How do you get them to continue to grow?
Yeah. So terrariums are a very, very complex system, but are very easy to make. Basically, you need humidity, you need light, and that's about it. A substrate of any sort will really work, because if you have humidity and light, the plants will produce their own roots and kind of dig into that substrate. So when starting off any of these, I want them to be as perfect as possible. No flaws, as humanly perfect as I can possibly get it, thinking about craftsmanship, thinking about keeping it pristine. And then I'm adding in these organic creatures, and they do what they want to do. They grow and they die, and as they grow and die, they start to pile on top of each other and open up new space in the canopy for other things to grow. But basically, I'm starting with tropical plants because at some point I want to do native plants. I just don't have the space. That would need to be on such a large scale, but tropical plants are really easy for condensed small systems, as they're very used to humidity, and they are very used to light, or at least indirect light. So they do well in these kind of environments, and they're conducive to having that kind of erosion effect. Like you'll notice, like on both of these pieces, all three of them have things that I really like about it, where like there's this slime algae that has colonized the exterior, and I didn't rub away any of these portions. It's just automatically kind of decaying and then rubbing off and kind of spilling, and then mold takes over, and it's letting life grow where it wants to grow, and like trying to fight for life, I guess, is like, I look at them and I go, wow, there's a lot happening in there that's not at all where I thought it was gonna go. And there's something beautiful and peaceful about watching life prevail, because I think being born in that sort of system, like that middle class system, you kind of feel trapped like this. You kind of feel like if you don't succeed, if you're not able to climb, if you're not able to do that stuff, maybe you'll get, you know, someone will outshine you, and you'll get shot down from the light, you know what I mean? So it's a very competitive environment, and they are kind of peaceful, but at the same time, like over here, I like this one especially because this is new since I've came here. But this plant is now growing down. He was growing up the wall, and he's tapping his roots on top of this other leaf, and that's, I mean, like it's not going to necessarily kill that plant, but you can see how they almost wrestle inside of the structures. They're like wrestling on top of each other, and like it's beautiful and it's scary, and I love it.
There is kind of this like monster plant look to them because they do kind of have their own little worlds, and it's like this world that's run just by the plants themselves.
Yeah.
And that's like disconcerting for a human, but also kind of like, I think there is that comfort to it too. Yeah.
I like how this piece has something really fascinating happening. The actual metal structure that is supporting the plants themselves is being eroded away and rusting, and the plants are definitely contributing to this. So it's like thinking of that relationship to like our human structures. Personally, as a kid, I've always had a fascination with ruins or like abandoned places, and I mean, like, you can go down the street and go find an abandoned house. Like, it's not uncommon, especially living in Ohio. Like, we're very familiar with the economic situation in this area. And I think that there's something sad and beautiful. It's like after us. This is what happens. Yeah. And because we don't enact control, we kind of feel helpless to that. Like, I hope to seal this off one day and never touch it again. And it just, like, does its thing, and if it dies, it dies. If it lives, it lives, and that's sort of the beauty of it.
Yeah, this one especially, like, are the plants growing, that's the foam, right?
Yeah.
Is that painted by you as well?
Yes.
Okay, so you're kind of like taking that kind of facade, and then the plants are kind of growing into it, so you are making like your own ruin.
Yes, I am in some ways making my own ruin, exactly. It's a styrofoam background that I carved out, that I then built these like shelves or slots in between each connecting piece of styrofoam, and I then siliconed sphagnum moss, which is a super absorbent material. It's a natural material. It's a form of long fiber moss that holds on to water, and so it becomes very conducive to plants rooting into it. And so when I was thinking about this, I wanted something vertical, something towering over you, kind of getting back to that like unfeeling massive object, like a skyscraper almost, kind of looking down at you. But I also wanted the plants to grow all the way up, so I had to like make it my own way. And there's some moments in here where I like didn't paint the actual, and this is not glass, it's like a vinyl. But there's like moments where like you probably can't see it, but it's green on the edges, and that's algae taking over the edge. That's not me adding in faux like ruinous. This, I have photos of documentation of this being like perfectly set up, gorgeous, like, and then I just let it run. And it's really cool.
How long does it take to kind of, I guess, take off and change and grow?
It's really cool. Honestly, it depends on the scale, because on a small piece, it can happen really quickly. On this big piece, it maybe took, my BFA was in May, and I started pre-planting it before spring break, so that would have been sometime around, right after Christmas break. So I was at sometime working on, after December, after January, I started planting it, because I knew the kind of look that I wanted for May, and I always joked with my friends during school that I'm on plant time. I can't rush that ruined aesthetic. It's not something that I can force. It's something that I have to work with. So this one was much slower because the plants had to mature. All these guys were all down here, way at the bottom, and a lot of smaller plants were up here. But as it grew, of course, it it murdered those. To say it lightly.
Yeah. No, I love the fact that when you came in, you were like, oh, they've changed so much. Like, you could automatically tell how much had happened. So we do have a really good question, and something that I wanted to talk about as well is like environmentalism, climate change. Is that something that you're interested in investigating? We had a question saying, like, you talk about the unsustainable environments that these create. Are you kind of like commenting on, I guess, there's an unsustainable environment that we're creating on the earth as well?
I think that's a great point. It wasn't my initial journey when I started this project. I mean, I kind of started building things that I wanted to build and then kind of formulated this whole work around it. But only as they've aged have I realized the kind of, I always knew about the environmental aspect. I just didn't talk about it because it is such a big subject.
Yeah.
And I don't want to pretend that I'm like being an activist in the work that I'm creating, but I think they mirror our environment and how futile it is to try to preserve something as conditions change. So, like, I'm not a nihilist, I'm quite an optimist, I think, and that's why I'm like, I almost view these as like bastions of life. It's like, we're sitting here. I view these as like those little universes that are trying to keep it going. Even if the exterior conditions don't match what is ideal for them, because the conditions inside of this box are perfectly ideal, but yet I am constrained by economics and space, and I can't give them everything they need to exist on a full level. Mm-hmm. Like, I would need a room this big. To give them all the space that they need, and that's not viable.
It's definitely, because at first look, like, people might come in and be like, oh, this is like a perfect environment for life, but it's like, only for so long.
Only for so long, because as these, it's called upsizing. As these plants upsize, which is just they're becoming a more mature version of themselves, all these philodendron species, as they grow up on the trees, they get larger leaves. So that makes it harder for down here. It's quite dark. And there's plants that were originally planted down there, and they're now in almost complete shade, where originally they had just as much light as they did at the top. And there will be a day that something will take over, and it will probably, like, kill everything else. I hate saying that because it's like I love plants. They're very important to me. But it's like, it's how life is, I guess. Life is, life is hard. It's hard in nature, and it's hard in real life, and it's hard in trying to replicate nature because you're always going to fail. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that, like, anytime that you're using actual plants or, like, plant-based imagery, like, issues of climate and environmentalism is going to come up.
Yes.
Kind of no matter what.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I was also just kind of thinking, looking at the tubing, kind of connecting all of the structure, and it looking kind of like a breathing tube or something. Yeah. And like these things like need a breathing tube to survive, even though that's where the water is coming from for this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is like that, like, I mean, we're all very familiar with respirators nowadays, you know, and I was definitely thinking about those when I was creating these. It's like that life support system that is connecting you to life. Without this, without the plug in the wall, this dies. And not in, like, an insignificant amount of time. It will die in, like, maybe 6. It's, you know, not sustainable without our input, which is the part that I'm trying to get away from. I don't want to have input in this. I want them to exist, but we're sort of trapped in that.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting kind of quandary.
Yeah, this is getting real now. I'm not a nihilist. I promise I am not a nihilist. These are beautiful. Beauty in the pain, I guess.
Is there, like, going back to, I guess, is there a way that you pick the plants or where they're stationed?
Yeah.
Like, planted in there when you first do it?
Absolutely. So the plants themselves, I come from raising frogs. So in the vivarium hobby, we have a lot of tropical plants and trying to make things look like nature, and that's really where the main inspiration came from. So bromeliads are usually at the top of your canopy. Those are going to be your highlight plants that are going to hold water and become almost like cups at the top of the canopy that will drip down onto the system. And then the plants that I mostly work with, because they're the most forgiving, are philodendrons, as they like high humidity. And they grow fairly quickly. So
are those these ones?
Yeah, so this is a philodendron serpents. We have philodendron Florida green, and then philodendron, the big one in the back is splendid. Where that's it, that it's called splendid, not that it is splendid. So these are all these kind of varieties of philodendrons that some of them aren't natural, some of them are man-made. That gets into a whole other conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And some of them are like native species to their environment, like that is a species plant. And so I'm trying to think about placing plants in opportunities so that I'm able to achieve a certain aesthetic that I'm going for in the long term. So I have to plant thinking about what it looks like today. Like now is like the optimal version of it.
Yeah.
Like, it's probably gonna go downhill from this point on, but like I was thinking I need to fill up this space. So if I start down there, eventually it will hit here, and the leaves will be at a certain size so that it looks good at a certain angle. You know.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Keeping the aesthetic preferences in mind, because that's the whole point. Is that it's adhering to certain aesthetics.
And this one's the biggest one that you've done, correct?
Yeah. It's the hardest one that I've done. It's a lot of work. It's not the biggest one in the plans. This is just Gen 1.
Okay.
So
that was going to be my next question. I guess what's Generation 2 maybe in thinking like or process like?
Generation 2 is more works like this, but maybe not taller, but the scale of it is physically larger. And the hope is that I can start to create systems that don't need my maintenance as much. I want them to be as autonomous as I can, and each generation will get further to that goal. So like Eco 6 is it takes like I have like a 5-gallon bucket in here, and it needs water a lot, and I'll have to check that at some point. And what I would like to have is so that the water filters back through into the subsystem again. But I didn't design it properly, but these have taught me how I wish the next models look.
Yeah, I mean that's how any body of work, like the first kind of thing always teaches you what you want to change to make it better, like different.
I keep on bringing up ships, but like for some reason, like if you think about oil tankers, like each new model has just like a little bit something different about it, and like I like an idea of there being a room of these, and they're all like kind of doing their own thing, and they all kind of look vaguely similar, but each have their own unique quirks. Like I like that idea of a similarity, but slight variation between each model.
Yeah. So another question we had, what, if any, I guess, would your plans be when they do eventually kind of, I guess, reach their life's end, when they die? Would you reuse any of these ones in future projects, or would they end? Would they become something else?
So, fun fact, there are 7 of them, but there's only 3 in this room. So what happened to the other ones? They are not alive, and or are what I consider standby mode, as in they're, this is again morbid, but I think in these kind of terms, it's like their carcasses are still primed to be used again. Yeah. But their living passengers are not there, and it's kind of messed up. So I have 2 or 3 works that are in standby where I think that they didn't get, I failed on my part setting them up for success. So they didn't get to do the whole cycle. They just died. And so I think that for some models, they will have a second life. But I have quite a few that they are dead, that is it. Once they die, that is my, like the first model, which doesn't look anything like these, but in fact is like a hanging wall piece that has a terrarium in the center, is really dead and is laying outside in my backyard currently. But that doesn't mean it's dead. That just means it's on its next life, and now it will be shown as.
Okay, so it'll just be shown as. Yeah.
Outdoor nature has started to take this one,
oh,
which is now a new aspect. It's like enclosing nature inside, but what if that enclosure is now being affected by the actual elements?
I mean, would you ever, I guess, take it apart or strip it for parts and use them in new things, or?
I will strip the valuable parts. I think
that makes sense.
Again, thinking about ships and salvaging and like going through and like what gets scrapped and what doesn't. Like, there's something fascinating about taking this once really workhorse that you relied on and then stripping it of parts, or in fact using it as like a mother. So like the next version of that would be like, this piece eventually will retire. I would probably nanny this piece because it's my baby. But it would be in a non-functional, like it would be like I would have to maintain it, and I would use it as a mother to feed the other pieces. So I would take
that's
cuttings
interesting.
off of it. Which that's a term from like gardening, which I'm a big avid gardener. Especially in the houseplant trade, you have like a mother plant that is your main deliverer of all of your babies.
Were you already kind of like a gardener and into plants before you kind of thought this up? Did that kind of help you think like what ideas did you have that came to you to be like, I'm gonna make these giant terrariums?
So I've always wanted to build giant terrariums, and my BFA was a great shot to just be like, oh my gosh, painting degree, sculpture degree, giant terrariums. No. I've always loved plants. My mom and my grandma I've always been very close to them. I've been an avid gardener since I was a little kid. So they've always been in my life, and I actually have a massive houseplant collection at home. I think they're one of the most purest organisms on Earth. They are somehow silent, but are just so emotive. So, I mean, they've always been in my life. And again, being in the frog hobby, I built a lot of terrariums and stuff like that. And so my goal wasn't to go to art school. I actually was going to go be a horticulturalist. I wanted to go I got accepted into OSU, and I was going to go to their Worcester campus and go be a horticulturalist. And I sort of put that away up until my senior year, and I was like, wait, art can be anything. I'm going to go make plant art. And do it right, because if I am to make a comment on how I feel, it's sort of a trend that I've noticed in the last couple of years is plant art, and artists doing it really bad. And like, I at least am trying to set up plants for success, and like trying to get away from people just having plants in a gallery and then watching it die. Like, I at least am trying to set them up with something for the future. So it was sort of also kind of a reaction to that in the plant and just the art world. And I was like, nobody does terrariums in the art world, really? I mean, there's a couple that really like them, but...
Well, yeah, it's interesting because you think of a terrarium as maybe like a decoration or something for someone that's like very into plants, or like a hobby or something, and elevating it into contemporary art, whatever that is, even is an interesting kind of like thought and process.
Taking your grandma's it's taking your grandma's quilts and putting them up in the gallery kind of thing. I mean,
that's what I do.
I love it. No, but I love it. I mean, if you can do it with that, I'm gonna do it with my wine bottle terrarium in the gallery. Like, it's gonna be cool. I think these certain crafts are not as seen in the art world, or are even looked over, because it's not painting, or it's not this specific form of sculpture. It's a hobby. And I'm like, well, it doesn't have to be. It could be this whole big, beautiful thing.
Oh, yeah, I love that. Okay, well, if anyone watching has some questions, you can feel free to get them in now or after the live stream, and I will relay them.
I would love to answer questions, because I like, if not now, reach out to me, because I love talking about this stuff, and if you want to pick my brain, I want to pick your brain.
Okay, well, I think we're going to start wrapping it up, so let me get my camera back. Okay. Woo, there we go. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you Thomas for sharing your work. Remember, you can see SUBARIUM II reprise at Akron Soul Train in the CapSOUL Gallery until March 23rd. So I definitely try to come see these in person. They are really amazing, and my phone camera is not going to be able to do them justice.
Photos are doing justice.
Yes, and then follow our page for more updates. We have tons of upcoming programs and workshops and performances that you guys won't want to miss. And we'll see you in the next live stream. Bye!